You already know enough English to have this conversation, so why did your mouth just stop working? You have a 5,000-word vocabulary. You know your grammar rules. You can read a novel, and you still freeze the second someone asks you a question in English.
That's not a coincidence, and it's not because you're bad at English.
It's actually the opposite. Today, we're talking about why the smartest, most prepared learners are often the ones who stay the most silent, and what to actually do about it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so I have to start with something embarrassing.
Ooh, I love embarrassing.
Last month, I was in Paris for a work trip. Before the trip, I studied French every single day for 6 weeks. Flashcards, grammar drills, I even watched French news with subtitles off just to prove to myself I could do it.
That's a lot of prep.
It was. And then I got to this little bakery near my hotel, and the woman behind the counter asked me something simple. I think she asked which bread I wanted, and my brain just shut off, completely blank. I knew the word for bread. I knew the word for this one. I had used both words in practice 100 times, but standing there in real time, nothing came out. I just pointed and said, that one, in English.
See, that story is so relatable, it almost hurts.
Right?
Because I did the exact same thing in Spanish, except mine happened at a pharmacy in Mexico City, and I needed something for a headache, which, is not a great time to lose your words.
Oh, no.
I had literally studied the phrase for I have a headache the week before, practiced it in the mirror, and when the pharmacist looked at me and said, ¿En qué le puedo ayudar?, which just means, how can I help you?, I panicked and said nothing for like 4 full seconds. 4 seconds doesn't sound long, but in a conversation, it's an eternity.
It really is.
And what's wild is this happens to millions of English learners every single day. They can read a news article in English, they can write a paragraph, but the moment they need to speak out loud in real time with a real person waiting for a response, something locks up.
So today's question is basically, if you already know the English, why does your mouth refuse to cooperate?
And more importantly, what do you actually do to fix it?
Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain. Because this isn't just nerves, there's real science behind it.
The first piece comes from Stephen Krashen, who's one of the most cited researchers in second language acquisition. Krashen talks about something called the affective filter.
Which sounds complicated, but is actually pretty simple.
Right. Think of the affective filter like a valve between what you know and what you can actually produce. When you're relaxed, curious, and not afraid of making a mistake, that valve opens wide and language flows out fairly easily. But when you're anxious, self-conscious, or scared of being judged, that valve slams shut. It doesn't matter how much vocabulary you have stored. If the filter is up, very little gets through.
So my brain wasn't missing the word for bread. It was there. The door was just locked.
Exactly. Stress didn't erase your knowledge. It blocked access to it.
That actually makes me feel a lot better about the bakery thing.
It should. And Krashen also talks about something called the silent period. This is really common in children learning a first or second language, but it happens with adults too. It's this stretch of time where a learner is absorbing huge amounts of input, listening, reading, understanding, but isn't producing much spoken language yet. And that's not laziness. It's actually a normal, even necessary stage.
So being silent for a while isn't a red flag.
Not at all, as long as you don't stay stuck there forever. Which brings us to the second researcher, Swain.
I love Swain because her theory is basically the missing half of Krashen's idea.
Right. Krashen focuses a lot on input, meaning what you listen to and read, but Swain's output hypothesis argues that input alone isn't enough to become fluent. You actually have to produce language, speak it, write it, push it out of your own mouth, because that process forces your brain to notice gaps in what you know.
Can you explain that a bit more, the noticing part?
Sure. When you're just listening, you can understand a sentence using context clues, tone, maybe a word or two you recognize, without fully processing the grammar. But the second you try to say that same sentence yourself, you suddenly realize, wait, I don't actually know how to conjugate this verb, or I'm missing a connecting word here. Output exposes the holes that input can hide.
So input teaches you to understand, but output teaches you to actually use it.
Exactly. And that's why so many learners get stuck. They keep consuming more input, more shows, more podcasts, more articles, thinking that eventually speaking will just happen automatically. But Swain's research suggests that speaking is its own separate skill that has to be practiced directly.
This connects to a third name, too, Richard Schmidt and his noticing hypothesis.
Yes, Schmidt's core idea is that you cannot acquire a language feature unless you consciously notice it first. So if you're just passively listening without paying close attention, a lot of language just washes over you without sticking.
So there's this cycle. You need input to build knowledge, you need noticing to make that knowledge stick, and you need output to actually access it under pressure.
And most silent learners are stuck at step one. Tons of input, very little output, so the connection between knowing and speaking never gets built.
It's like having a huge library of books but never learning where the door is.
That's a great way to put it. The knowledge is there, but the retrieval pathway isn't strong enough yet.
Okay, so knowing this is helpful, but I know people listening are thinking, great, now what do I actually do about it?
Right. So this is where we want to give you something concrete. We call it the green light method, and it's built around one idea. You have to lower the stakes before you can raise your output.
I like that framing already.
There are 4 steps. Step 1 is what we call the whisper stage.
Explain that.
So instead of jumping straight into a real conversation with a stranger, which is high pressure, you start by speaking English out loud, alone, in a low-stakes environment. In the shower, in the car, while cooking, you literally whisper or speak sentences to yourself. Describe what you're doing, narrate your day, answer imaginary questions.
So it's practice without an audience.
Exactly. Because part of what freezes people isn't the language itself, it's the fear of being watched and judged while producing it. The whisper stage removes that audience completely, so your mouth and brain get used to physically producing English sounds without the pressure of a real listener.
That's actually something I wish I'd done before Paris. I practiced in my head, silently, but I never said things out loud.
That's such a common mistake. Silent rehearsal in your head feels like practice, but it doesn't train the actual muscle memory of speaking. Your mouth needs reps just as much as your brain does.
Okay, step 2.
Step 2 is the echo stage. This is where you take something you're already listening to, a podcast like this one, a show, a video, and instead of just listening passively, you pause and repeat sentences out loud right after you hear them.
So you're borrowing someone else's sentence structure.
Exactly, and this connects directly back to Schmidt's noticing hypothesis. When you repeat a sentence out loud, you're forced to notice its rhythm, its word order, its pronunciation, in a way you never would just by hearing it pass by.
And it removes the fear of choosing the wrong words because you're literally copying a sentence that's already correct.
Right. Low risk, high reward. Step 3 is the green light stage itself, which is where you start having very short, very low pressure, real conversations. And the key rule here is length. We're talking 60 seconds, 90 seconds max.
Why so short?
Because most people avoid speaking because they imagine a long, high-stakes conversation where they might get stuck and embarrass themselves for minutes at a time. But if you tell yourself, I only need to survive 90 seconds, the affective filter Krashen talked about doesn't spike as high. It's manageable. And 90 seconds of real spoken output does more for your fluency than an hour of silent listening.
That's the Swain principle in action, forcing output, even in tiny doses.
Exactly. And step 4, the final stage, is what we call green light chaining, which just means you gradually string more of these short conversations together across your week. Not one long, terrifying conversation, but many small, low-pressure ones back to back over time.
So it's less about one big leap and more about lowering the barrier over and over until speaking stops feeling like a performance.
That's the whole idea. Whisper,
Echo,
green light, chain, 4 stages, and each one is designed to lower your affective filter just enough that your existing knowledge can actually come out.
I actually used a version of this with French after the bakery disaster.
Tell me.
I started narrating my mornings in French, out loud, alone, making coffee, brushing my teeth, all in French. Badly, but out loud. Within about 2 weeks, I noticed something. When my French tutor asked me a question, I wasn't translating in my head anymore before answering. Words were just coming out.
That's the retrieval pathway getting stronger, exactly what Swain's research predicts.
And honestly, it felt less scary because I'd already said dozens of imperfect sentences out loud to nobody. Saying imperfect sentences to somebody didn't feel that different anymore.
That's the goal. You're not eliminating the fear completely. You're just shrinking the gap between silence and speech until it's small enough to cross.
All right, let's do our quick vocabulary review before we wrap up, because we used some useful phrases today that are worth locking in.
Good idea. First one, affective filter. This refers to the emotional barrier, like anxiety or fear of judgment, that blocks you from using language you already know.
You could say, my affective filter went up the second the interview started and I forgot every word I'd practiced.
Next, silent period. This describes a stage where a learner is absorbing a lot of language, but not yet producing much of it out loud.
For example, don't worry that your child hasn't spoken much English yet. They're probably just in the silent period.
Third, output hypothesis, which is Swain's idea that producing language, not just consuming it, is essential to true fluency.
You might say, I finally understood the output hypothesis once I started speaking daily instead of just watching videos.
Fourth phrase, and this one is more casual, brain freeze. It means your mind suddenly goes blank, usually under pressure.
Definitely had a brain freeze at that bakery in Paris.
And finally, tip of my tongue, which means a word feels almost remembered but won't quite come out.
I knew the word for bread. It was right on the tip of my tongue, but nothing came out.
Great phrases to add to your own speaking practice this week.
So, if you take one thing from today's episode, let it be this. Knowing English and speaking English are two different skills. And silence doesn't mean you failed to learn. It usually means your affective filter is up and your output muscle hasn't been trained yet.
Try the green light method this week. Whisper alone, echo what you hear, keep your first real conversation short, and chain small wins together instead of chasing one big, perfect conversation.
You already know English more than you think.
You just have to give yourself permission to say it badly first.
See you next time on Fluent English Podcast.
Bye for now.